So zone 2 training, let's be real, it can be slow, repetitive, and can feel boring at times. So how do I stay motivated to stick with it? In this video, I'm going to be sharing some practical tips that I've picked up on over the last 15 years to make your zone 2 rides not just more bearable, but hopefully enjoyable. So whether you're training for actual endurance challenges or just going through a training phase like myself, then hopefully these tips will give you some good ideas. Now, there's some seriously good benefits from training at low intensity. Most of us already know this, and for the sake of time, I'm going to leave some of these up on the screen for you to maybe pause and Google and research a bit for yourself later. But the major thing I think that most of us struggle with, including myself at times, is the execution of doing the rides. We know they're good for us, but doing them and sticking to it is another thing entirely, I think. So firstly, remembering the big picture. Like, where is this training fitting into your training plan? And you have to buy into the benefits that this low intensity training is going to bring you. Whether you're doing a block of specific low intensity, or whether you're just going through your season and needing to know where and when and how long I'm going to be dedicating certain rides of the week to targeting this intensity. You could have goals that relate specifically to this. So for argument's sake, you could go out and do a 3-hour ride at zone 2 and you want to practice fueling. Maybe you go out and you ride 3 hours and you just eat one banana, but you're going to start to eat one banana every hour. But subjectively, you want to finish the ride feeling that you've fueled appropriately by potentially eating more than 3 bananas, but you get the idea. Now, on my last video, which was breaking down my recent base building training block, there was a comment there that was really interesting that said they like to break up their ride into segments. So for argument's sake, a 3-hour ride, and you do 4 by 30 minutes at zone 2 with 10-15 minutes of slightly easier riding, maybe in zone 1 in between, to break up the ride. Now, the argument there, of course, could be that you're not spending all your time in zone 2, but if you were to do lactate testing or lab testing, generally you would still be within range. And to be honest, it would be one of those situations where it's more about just trying to make the ride more motivating to do, as opposed to hitting the zone bang on. And what 15 years has taught me is sometimes it's more important to make a session interesting so that you can do it consistently rather than have it being boring and you never want to do it. A big one for me has always been group rides. And because of the invention of indoor training and being able to connect with so many people, this can relate to both those that ride indoors primarily and those who ride outdoors. Of course, riding indoors, you've got the pace partners on Zwift, but you've also got some pretty dedicated group rides on there that have some watt and power ranges that people know that group is going to be doing, and they can easily tag along to the appropriate group. Think as well about maybe joining other communities. There's lots of cycling communities out there that use Discord, they use Facebook, and they use WhatsApp to ride together and communicate while they're riding indoors. So it adds another layer of socializing, I suppose, to this. People say nowadays zone 2 training is essentially that conversation pace effort. So when I go out riding in a group, for example, outdoors, that's very easy to get a group together when everyone knows that it's going to be a social pace ride. Albeit when we hit a climb, it's difficult to keep people from riding off. But that's where the discipline comes in, and you certainly notice it if you do ever go on group rides, and when everyone buys into riding steady and the same pace and not riding harder up the climbs, it is a noticeable difference to how the group rides and how it is cohesive throughout the ride. So trying to get everybody to buy into that is probably one of the first challenges you might have. But at least starting off with, 2 to 4 riders in a group, you at least are able to keep a lid on things and everybody knows exactly what's happening. When the group is any bigger, it becomes a lot more difficult to control. A bit of a pro insight, but what you may notice with riders that go out on training camps and do large volumes of riding, one of the reasons why they do that, not only because they're capable of doing it, but when they're riding a group of say 15 riders, and they'll tend to split the team in half so that there's not such a big group and everyone gets to ride at the front and share an equal amount of work. But you also have to extend the ride time potentially, so that because they're riding at generally a lower intensity than maybe what they'd like to for, adequate endurance zone 2 type of thing, they have to ride longer in order to give the same or similar kind of stimulus versus riding shorter at a slightly harder or more disciplined zone 2 intensity. So just a quick note, if you're enjoying this video so far, I would really appreciate a like. If you could watch the video all the way through, that would be fantastic, because it really tells the algorithm gods that you're interested in this video. All right, let's crack on. So this is not a new tip by any means, but most of us that ride indoors and train indoors, we by standard now probably are listening to a podcast or watching a TV show or a movie. I recently watched the new Carry On film on Netflix, which is supposed to be like the new Die Hard film, which apparently Die Hard is the best film to ever come out of Wales. I'm sure only Welsh people will get that joke. But I would say within this bracket of entertaining yourself with things like that, live streaming has become a thing of beauty for me. Whenever I live stream, time seems to fly, and especially if you have a couple of people who are in the chat and they're watching, or they're also riding themselves, they're watching you, so it's like they're holding you accountable. It's like a couple of days ago, the vegan cyclist Tyler Pierce did a Rafa Festive 500 all in one day, but he live streamed the whole thing for like 11 and a half, 12 hours. That level of accountability to do that, it's extremely powerful. And it can be a very effective way of getting these type of sessions done. I've certainly found that since having a gravel bike, I've been more motivated to ride just in general. Doesn't matter what intensity it is. Of course, having like the location that you can ride that bike and head out to the trails or head to any gravel network that you might have, but it kind of forces you to take a path or go on an adventure you haven't been on, and that can be incredibly powerful when it comes to driving motivation. So keeping on the theme of that, so back like 15 years ago when I first started cycling and I was in a cycling club, every weekend we used to have what they called like destination rides, and these would be to specific places. It could be a cafe one week, it could be like a beach the next week, which would also have a cafe at it, but it would be like to different places, like to waterfalls or to places of interest, like whatever. And the goal then was to kind of create a route that would get you to these places, and it wouldn't necessarily be the same route every time, but we might end up being taken there by a rider that knows the roads a bit better than you do. Now, as we've discussed already in this video, there are a plethora of ways to stay motivated when you're out doing long training rides or sessions, particularly at low intensity. Even, websites like Strava, with the Festive 500, we have monthly climbing challenges, monthly distance challenges, and you can take a look at the leaderboards there. And it always blows my mind to see just how many miles people rack up. And for the most part, they're just riding pretty much steady state, low intensity, which is kind of what we're talking about today. And I honestly don't know how anyone can't be inspired when they see the lengths that people go to get this mileage done. And also there's a healthy competition there in a way that you can see where you rank in your country. You can see how many miles you've done versus maybe the person who's in the top 50 in their country. Now obviously don't go down too big a rabbit hole there, but it's just incredible to see what people can do, and maybe you could use that to your advantage. Now this wouldn't be a video about maintaining motivation during Zone 2 without mentioning the word fun. Now I mention this because most of the time when we ride indoors, we are pedaling. If we're training, we're doing Zone 2, most of us will use erg mode, just set it and forget it, and be riding at that same power for 2, 3, 4, heck, maybe even 7 hours. Now doing this session might be great for you. You might really enjoy it, you might thrive off it. I know lots of people that can struggle with doing that. And I just wanted to say that it's not necessary. You don't have to glue to a certain power output to actually reap those benefits. Like years ago when we never had this ability to ride indoors at a set wattage or effort for hours and hours, we still made do, and we managed to build a perfect base, endurance, Zone 2, whatever you want to call it, outdoors, on group rides, on club rides, freewheeling from time to time, and just enjoying being out for hours on the bike. I've been there myself. There were periods of times where I wouldn't even stop at a cafe during an endurance ride because of the fear of not completing the ride all in one go would damage the stimulus I was trying to achieve from the ride. Sometimes you've just got to pull over and stop for that kick. So there we go. I thought we would end on a little bit of a fun note, and there's some tips for you to stay motivated during your Zone 2 endurance block. It's about making them enjoyable and effective so that you can stay consistent in the long term. Now if you have any tips or tricks of your own, or you implement any of these, then please let us know in the comment section to keep the conversation going. I look forward to seeing you in the next video this week. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I will see you then.